Dan Hudock, how are you?
John Pagetta, good. You?
Well, PTS Dan. So, um, well, let's start broad. So I want to start with a little bit of storytelling, but I don't want to, not in the traditional sense. I mean more in the way of we as salespeople all have these stories we tell.
Hmm.
We tend to tell the same stories over and over because they're the ones that stand out, they're impactful to us, etc. We use them for relatable purposes, all that kind of stuff. But I think oftentimes we don't take our own advice out of our own stories. And I think we can learn a lot from those types of things. I position it, I'm old enough now to think good old days kind of stuff. And we did this and we did that. But I realize as I've gotten older, I don't have quite as many stories to tell because I don't necessarily engage in the same way. I do things differently. And so I'm actually trying to get back to things that will create more stories to tell because those things are new to me. And that helps me grow and that helps me do different things, et cetera. So, can you talk about some of those storytelling elements, the lessons we can learn from our own prior experiences, and how to put that into a phase where we keep ourselves growing and learning and doing?
Mm. Well, in the world of sales, one of the reasons I used to tell stories was to make me look good and make the prospect look
Yeah.
bad, right? I'm the great sales guy, and this is what they did, and they were horrible, and blah blah blah. And I remember telling this story about a nonprofit that was ordering. This is in my previous life before Sandler, ordering some T-shirts from me, and I gave them pricing and everything, and then they went to the incumbent and gave the order to them. And I would tell that story about how dare that prospect do that to me. They dragged
Yeah.
me along. And I remember my coach telling me, "Well, when did you talk to them about the incumbent?" And I had to realize I
Crickets.
didn't.
Yep.
So my story changed because then it was no longer telling that story to make the prospect look bad. It was
Yep.
telling that story to make me not look so good.
Yep.
And so, John, I think that's one of the things that we can do is we can take our stories from the past and we can use them to make us look great, but the reality is we're also not looking so good. And maybe that's the perspective we need to be viewing as well, because then we learn from them
Yes.
and then we move on. And now my stories are different. You always hear the same old thing from your parents. Oh, I used to walk both ways to school, uphill in the snow. Well, why are they telling that? Because they want you to realize you don't have it as hard as they did. I don't know. I think we do have it as hard as they did, and sometimes even harder. And so stories should be used to learn from, not to put
Yes.
somebody else down.
Yeah, I think that's the got to be the key takeaway is it's how do you learn from your own to get better, but then how does a prospect learn from that story where they can realize where they can start to improve or do things better, frankly, whether it's with you or not.
Hmm.
That's when you know you've gotten where you need to be is if I end up being the one to solve that problem, that's terrific on top of everything else. But we can all now recognize the problem you have that you couldn't see the forest through the trees on previously.
Hmm.
And that changes the dynamic, changes the landscape and how you engage going forward.
Yeah, I mean, stories in their essence are a journey is about to begin, and then you overcome some difficulty and you achieve it. And
Yep.
I think so many times we forget about the going through the difficulty
Yeah.
in order to achieve.
Yep. There we go. Go make things hard. It's okay. Seriously though, when you make things harder on yourself and you make them harder on, you'll overcome those things where otherwise and see growth that you otherwise wouldn't see versus just remaining static.
That's so true. So
So,
true. All
all
right,
right,
take care, John.
see you in a moment.